When you walk for 30 minutes while fasting, something starts happening inside your body that you can't see. But it changes everything. Not on the surface, not immediately in the mirror, but deep inside your fat cells. Because from the outside, it looks like a simple walk. Just movement. Just steps. Something almost too basic to matter. But inside your body, those same 30 minutes can trigger a completely different response depending on the state you're in. And when you're fasting, your fat cells don't just sit there the way they normally do. They begin to change behavior. They shift from holding to preparing, from storing to releasing. But this doesn't happen automatically. It only begins when your body enters a specific internal condition. A condition where your system no longer relies on incoming energy, where signals start to change, and where your fat cells receive a message they don't usually get. A message that says, it's time to open. Because most of the time, your fat cells are not active. They are closed, locked in a state where energy stays inside, protected, waiting for the right signal to be released. And without that signal, nothing happens, no matter how much you move or how long you wait. So when you walk while fasting, you're not just burning energy, you're changing the signal your fat cells receive. And over those 30 minutes, something gradual begins to unfold. Not instantly, not dramatically, but step by step, your fat cells begin to respond. They begin to open. They begin to release. And the real question is not whether walking burns fat, but what actually happens inside your fat cells during those 30 minutes that makes this process possible in the first place. To understand what's happening, you have to look at what fat cells normally do when nothing is changing. Most of the time, your fat cells are not active at all. They are simply holding energy, storing it, keeping it inside like a reserve that your body may or may not use later. And this storage is not random. It's controlled. Your body decides when fat goes in and when it comes out. And most of the time, it chooses to keep it in. Because fat cells are designed to protect energy, not release it easily. They act like storage units with a locked door, and that door only opens when your body sends the right signal. The main signal that keeps that door closed is insulin. When insulin is present, your fat cells stay in storage mode. It tells your body that energy is available, that there's no need to access what's inside. So even if you're moving, even if you're using energy, your fat cells remain closed. The energy stays locked inside. This is why, in a normal fed state, your fat cells don't respond much to walking. They don't release, they don't change. They simply stay in place, closed. And this is the baseline most people live in without realizing it. A state where fat is constantly being stored or maintained, but rarely released in a meaningful way. So when you think about fat loss, it's not just about how much energy you use. It's about whether your fat cells are even open. Because if they're closed, nothing you do on the outside changes what's happening inside. And this is the key shift. Fat cells are not passive. They are responsive. They are waiting for a signal. And until that signal appears, they will continue to do what they were designed to do. Hold, store, protect. Which means the real change doesn't begin with movement. It begins with the moment those fat cells finally receive a signal strong enough to open. And this is where most people misunderstand what they're experiencing. Because when fat doesn't seem to change, when the body looks the same even after effort, the instinct is to assume something is wrong, that your body is not responding, that your metabolism is too slow, that maybe you're just not doing enough. But the truth is much simpler than that. Your fat cells are not ignoring you. They are following instructions. They are responding exactly the way they were designed to respond, based on the signals they receive. And if those signals don't tell them to release, they won't. Not because they can't, but because they shouldn't. From your body's perspective, releasing stored energy is a decision, not a reaction. It has to feel safe. It has to feel necessary. It has to feel consistent. And until those conditions are met, your fat cells stay closed, no matter how much you want them to open. This is why you can walk every day, move your body, even burn calories, and still not see meaningful fat loss. Because the problem is not the movement, it's the signal. Your fat cells have not yet received the message that tells them it's time to release what they've been holding on to. And once you understand that, something changes. Because you stop seeing fat loss as something you force, and you start seeing it as something you trigger. You realize that your fat cells are not stuck. They're waiting for the right combination of signals that tell them the environment has changed. That energy is no longer coming in, that it's safe to let go. So instead of pushing harder, you begin to ask a different question. Not, how do I burn more, but how do I get my fat cells to respond? Because the moment they respond, everything starts to move. Most people assume that if they walk long enough, their body will eventually start burning fat, that the act of walking itself is enough to trigger fat loss. But walking by itself does not tell your fat cells to open. It only creates demand. Your muscles need energy, so your body looks for fuel. But it doesn't automatically go to fat. It goes to whatever is easiest to access in that moment. And in a fed state, that is almost always glucose. So you can walk for 30 minutes, burn energy, even feel tired, and your fat cells may still remain closed. Because the signal hasn't changed. The internal environment is still telling your body that energy is available, that there's no urgency, that there's no need to unlock stored fat. This is why walking alone doesn't guarantee fat loss, because the movement is not the trigger, it's just the request. And your body decides how to respond to that request based on its current state. If insulin is elevated, if glucose is present, if your system feels stable, your body will meet that demand without ever touching your fat stores. It will simply use what's already circulating. So from the outside, it looks like you're doing everything right. But inside, your fat cells are not involved at all. They stay closed, unchanged, waiting. This is where fasting changes everything. Because fasting alters the environment your fat cells are responding to. It lowers insulin, it reduces available glucose, it removes the easy option your body usually relies on. And when you combine that state with walking, something different begins to happen. The request for energy is still there, but the easy answer is gone. And that's when your body starts looking deeper. That's when your fat cells finally become relevant to the process. Because now, for the first time, your body has both the reason and the condition to open them. And once that condition is in place, something begins to change at the cellular level. Insulin drops low enough, and that changes the signal your fat cells have been receiving. The lock starts to loosen. Because insulin is what keeps fat stored. It tells your body that energy is available, that there is no need to release what's inside. But when insulin falls, that message disappears. And without that signal, your fat cells are no longer being told to stay closed. At the same time, another system begins to activate. Hormone-sensitive lipase. This is the mechanism inside your fat cells that allows stored fat to be broken down and released. But it only becomes active when the conditions are right. When insulin is low, when your body actually needs energy, when the signal is clear. And when you walk while fasting, that signal becomes stronger. Your muscles are demanding fuel. Glucose is limited. So your body turns to what it has stored, and inside your fat cells, something begins to happen. Triglycerides, stored fat, start to break apart. They are converted into fatty acids, and those fatty acids begin to leave the fat cell. This is the moment where your fat cells stop holding and start releasing. But it doesn't happen instantly. It builds, because at the same time, AMPK is rising. This signal tells your body that energy is low and that it needs to become more efficient. It increases the demand for stored fuel, pushing your system further toward fat usage. So now, multiple signals are working together. Low insulin removes the barrier. Hormone-sensitive lipase activates the release. AMPK increases the demand. And walking keeps the process going. All of it aligned in the same direction. And when signals align like this, your fat cells don't hesitate. They respond, they open, they release. And this is the difference, because in most situations, those signals are mixed. Some say release, others say hold, and your body chooses safety. But here in this state, everything is clear. Everything is pointing toward one outcome. Use what is stored. And that's when your fat cells finally begin to do what you've been trying to make them do all along. And if you follow this process across those full 30 minutes, you begin to see that your fat cells don't just suddenly open all at once. They respond gradually. In the first few minutes of your walk, your body is still adjusting. It's recognizing the state you're in. If you're fasting, insulin is already low, glucose is reduced, and the environment is beginning to favor fat release. But the process is just starting. Around the 5 to 15-minute mark, something shifts. The demand for energy increases, and your body begins to rely more heavily on stored fuel. Inside your fat cells, the signals become stronger. Hormone-sensitive lipase becomes more active. Fat begins to break down more consistently. Fatty acids start to leave the cell at a noticeable rate. This is the phase where your fat cells begin to open, not fully, but enough to start contributing. Then, as you move into the 15 to 25-minute range, the process deepens. Your body is now more committed to using fat as a fuel source. The release of fatty acids increases. Your system becomes more efficient at transporting and using them. The hesitation that existed earlier begins to disappear. Your fat cells are no longer resisting, they are participating. And by the time you reach that final phase, around 25 to 30 minutes, something stabilizes. Your body settles into a rhythm. Fat release becomes steady. Fat usage becomes consistent. Your fat cells are no longer opening and closing in response to mixed signals. They are open, actively releasing energy in a way that supports movement. And this is where the real shift happens. Because the difference between the first minute and the 30th minute is not just time, it's activation. It's the transition from closed to open to fully engaged. And once your fat cells reach that state, you are no longer trying to make something happen. You are already inside the process. The longer you remain in that state, the more stable it becomes. The more your body adapts. The easier it becomes for your fat cells to respond the next time. Because they've already learned the signal. They've already experienced the release. And each time you repeat this process, that response becomes faster, more efficient, more natural, until eventually your body no longer hesitates. It simply responds. And your fat cells no longer stay closed by default. They open when the signal appears. And after that 30-minute window, something stays with you that most people don't expect. It's not just that fat was released in that moment. It's that your fat cells have changed how they respond. Because every time your body goes through this process, every time those signals align, every time your fat cells open and release energy, they become more sensitive to that signal, less resistant, less hesitant. They start to recognize the pattern. They begin to trust the state. So the next time you walk while fasting, the delay is shorter. The response is faster. The release begins earlier, and over time, what once took effort and precision starts to feel automatic. This is where the transformation really happens. Not in a single walk, but in how your fat cells adapt to repeated signals. They become more responsive, more willing to release, less protective. And that changes how your body behaves even outside of those 30 minutes. Your energy becomes more stable. Your hunger becomes less urgent. Your body stops relying so heavily on constant intake and starts using what it already has more naturally. This is the part most people miss. They think they are burning fat in that moment, but what they are really doing is training their fat cells, training them to open, training them to release, training them to respond to the right signals instead of staying locked by default. And once that training happens, everything becomes easier. Because you are no longer fighting your body. You are working with a system that has learned what to do. So the next time you think about walking, don't think about the calories you burn. Think about what you are teaching your fat cells to do. Because those 30 minutes are not just movement. They are a signal. A signal that, over time, changes how your body uses energy at its core. And once that change happens, fat loss is no longer something you have to force. It becomes something your body is finally ready to do on its own.